Welcome to today's Inside Story. I'm Billy Hallowell, and today I'm going to be joined by Christian Post reporter Michael Gryboski. A lot to break down today. We are going to be speaking about the Dirty Dozen list. This is the mainstream contributor list of sexual exploitation. It's put out by the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Each and every year it is covered over at the Christian Post. And today Michael is going to take us through what the list is and why it matters. Hey, Michael, how's it going today?
I'm doing all right.
Well, we have a very interesting story here to break down, and this is a story that Christian Post covers every year, the Dirty Dozen list. And let's just start there. For those who don't know, what is the Dirty Dozen list?
The Dirty Dozen list is an annual list compiled by the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, also known as NCOSE, that documents what they call mainstream contributors to sexual exploitation, with entries on their list ranging from social media platforms to big tech companies to other entities. And so it focuses on a lot of groups that might not be doing enough to protect users from sexual exploitative material. The mainstream entities are not technically pornographic organizations or organizations that produce pornography or are not directly involved in sex trafficking, but they're profiting from sexual exploitation. They're benefiting or they're enabling it somehow.
Yeah, and I mean, some of this is pretty disturbing, especially in light of what we know is happening on, social media across, really across media in general. Why does Nkosi put this list out? What is their ultimate end goal with it?
The end goal is to spread awareness of mainstream companies and websites and others that are enabling, contributing, or even profiting from sexually exploitative content, be it child porn, sex trafficking, or other things along those lines. The goal of Nicosi in this is that the list that they take out, that these entities will be put on the spot, so to speak, and the response from community outrage. Hopefully, the response from community outrage, they will change their policies, drop certain products, improve their child protection measures, or whatever other specific goals are in mind.
Yeah, I mean, they put this list out every year and, Christian Post covers it. How, in your view, does the list typically impact companies? I mean, do these companies, once they're put on the list, do they respond? Do they listen to the concerns? Is there any sort of reaction from them?
There definitely have been responses, and there have been a lot of positive responses from companies. There are many times in which a company will be put on the list, and then in response to that, they will pursue efforts to change things about how they do business, how they do safety measures, especially for minors. Kik is an example of this. Kik, Kik. It's a messaging app that's centered on kids that was placed on the 2023 Dirty Dozen list because it lacked good security measures to keep child sex predators away. However, shortly after they were put on the list last year, Nkosi reported that Kik actually did make several changes, including having an explicit content filter that is automatically turned on for all accounts, requiring users to have a valid email address, increased monitoring of content for anything graphic coming up, and also making users be able to block direct messages from strangers. Snapchat, that's another example of a company that appears to have been inspired by the Dirty Dozen list to change how they do business. After they were put on the Dirty Dozen list, the company announced last September that they were putting in new measures aimed at protecting users, tweener age, teenager aged users, and it was similar things to Cake, and that having those like requirements for, I think, valid email address, making it harder for strangers to interact with minors, basically. And Snapchat, in their statement, they actually explicitly thanked the National Center on Sexual Exploitation for the feedback and how they, and what they showed needed to be fixed. So it does definitely lead to changes here and there in businesses that are put on the list.
Are there companies that haven't responded? I would imagine some companies find themselves on this list annually. Which ones maybe have had no response or have maybe ignored it from what we could tell, at least?
Reddit is a great example of that. Reddit apparently has been on the list multiple times. I think at least four times actually, including this year. And a big issue with Reddit are its subreddits, these community forums where apparently they're barely monitored for graphics content. They oftentimes will be focused primarily on sexually exploitative content and graphic content. Reddit has announced changes like a new policy about going after revenge porn and improving child safety. But according to Nkosi, these efforts, while they've been announced, while they've technically been started, they don't really get properly implemented and they don't really turn out a lot of tangible improvements. So Reddit is one of the example of that. Another one is Roblox. Roblox is an online platform focused on children playing and creating computer games, and it made the Dirty Dozen list both this year and last year. And just a quote from Nikosi's report on Roblox, quote, Roblox still allows adult strangers to direct message, chat, and friend children, even with case after case of children being groomed and abused through the platform. A 5-year-old can still sign up with no email or parental permission and access games where their character may be sexually assaulted. End quote. So Roblox is another one that just doesn't seem to, last couple of years at least, has not responded to the concerns of Nkosi and others.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think some of these, companies decide not to respond? You would think it's really bad press to be placed on this list. What do you think drives that ignoring of the placement?
If I had to speculate, I think some companies do not believe the cost of implementing these various programs and policies, the possible expenses associated with enforcing these policies, is worth the effort. Also, I think some entities probably downplay the dangers of their lack of safety measures. They don't think of it as a big deal, they don't think of it as a big concern, and they don't think it's as dangerous as some people claim. I know that one big factor, though, that definitely comes into play during court cases regarding platforms accused of sex trafficking or sexually exploitative behavior is Section 230 of the 1996 Communications Decency Act. It's a federal law that protects websites from liability for content users publish on their platforms that might be defamatory or explicit. There have been legal actions against both Reddit and Twitter, now called X, regarding allegations of being involved in sex trafficking and sexually exploitative content, and in both of those cases, both of those legal challenges, the two platforms have survived and they've had court decisions in their favor because victims of sexual exploitation, while they make this argument that these places were complicit in their exploitation, courts will rule that Section 230 protects those sites from liability. And interestingly enough, for this year's Dirty Dozen list, Nkosi actually placed Section 230 on their list. Usually they put social media platforms or businesses on the list, but once in a while they'll put something that isn't a business or a social media platform on the list. And this year they put Section 230 of the Act on the list. And they decided to put it there because they believe that the law has been used and abused by tech companies and online platforms to skirt accountability for sexually harmful online content. And so, what Nkosi and their allies want to do is they want Congress to reform the law, and so that the companies can be better held accountable for the sexually graphic content that gets put on their platforms by third parties.
It's I mean, really, again, it's pretty disturbing, some of this, and so it is interesting. I appreciate you taking us through maybe some of the reasons behind some of that. I have to also ask you, this is a story every year, the Dirty Dozen list, that tends to get a lot of eyes on the Christian Post. People have deep interest in it in the audience. What do you think drives the audience interest in understanding these sorts of stories?
I think it's because people, especially parents, are very concerned about the well being of their children. When they hear about a mainstream company like a Roblox or major social media companies like Meta that are not doing enough to protect minors, when they hear about how these mainstream sites that they think of as safe for children, that market themselves as child friendly, actually having some weak spots and some points of danger and genuine concern, it hits home. It hits right at home, and the vast majority of parents out there, they don't want their kids being exposed to this type of stuff. And the idea that companies and platforms and apps that their kids are using might have these problems and might be used by sexual predators to attack their kids is definitely a very big cause for alarm.
No, absolutely. And parents wanting to be on top of those things.
Mhm.
It's actually encouraging that parents are wanting to know that these things are going on, because a lot of people, they put their kids in front of a tablet or a phone. They assume it's healthy and fine. They don't realize what's going on. And so to be aware of the potential pitfalls and dangers would be a really important thing, and is an important thing for these parents and families. Michael, as always, really appreciate having you on today and breaking this all down.
Thank you for having me.
We will have the link in the show notes so people can check the story out, and really appreciate your time. Everyone else, make sure you tune in next week for another episode of The Inside Story. In the meantime, head over to Christian Post and read the Christian Post today for all the news you need to read. We'll see you again next week.